Okay. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Okay, great. Um, so I came to Victoria in 1999 to take up my position at UVic. And at the same time, I started to work a little bit in the community out of other psychologists' offices, like as an associate in other psychologists' offices. And in 2003, I opened my first private practice. I don't know how many of you remember Dr. Frank Jagdis, but he was a pediatrician in our community for a really long time. And he had an extra office in his practice. And I started there back in 2003. Up until January of this year, the clinics were just called my name, like Dr. Jillian Roberts. But January 1st, we rebranded as MindKey Health. We always had the key as a logo, and so it made sense to incorporate that in a name that would go forward and reflect the work of my team, because it's not just me anymore. It's a great big team that is trying very hard to serve our community. I wanted to encourage you to connect with me. And, I'm on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, but I would love to connect, and I respond to messages. I respond to questions. Connecting with me on social media is going to get a quicker response than likely going through my offices. So I would just really love to know that we could continue the conversation past today. Some of you might know that I write children's books for Orca. And today there's some children's books in both. If they're not at Central yet, they're coming. And I've got a few interactive ideas planned for us. And the copies of the books are going to be like door prizes. Now, I know at Central que vous avez aussi un programme d'immersion. Une fois, j'ai enseigné en français et j'écris en français aussi. Et donc, vous pouvez voir mes titres en français ici qui sont publiés par Québec Amérique. So, for those of you at Central in French Immersion, there's French titles as well. In fact, the books have been translated into about 5 or 6 different languages, and they have sold over 200,000 copies since I started writing them. So I mentioned that in 2003, I started to see children in the community, and I think I'm probably best known for doing psychoeducational assessments. We also do crisis intervention and counseling, child and family counseling, and we've started to provide some supports to adults, like going beyond the children. The reason is because my children that I saw early on in my career are now having children themselves. I can't do it by myself. I tried to do it by myself for a really long time, and it just was impossible. And so I've slowly have developed a clinical team. We have our main office is on the mezzanine level of the Parkside Hotel. We have a second clinic on Beacon Avenue in Sydney, and this past April opened up a West Shore office in Belmont Market in Langford. Now, one of the things that children would know me for is that I've got a thing for owls. And in every clinic, there's 101 owls. Some of the owls are obvious. They're paintings on the wall, but some are little owls hanging from the ceiling underneath the chair by an electrical outlet. And my hope is that children, when they're waiting to be seen, their little eyes will look around and they'll try to count the owls. And eventually I get asked, why do you like owls? And I tell kids and teenagers about Greek mythology, the goddess Athena, who was the goddess of wisdom and strategy. She was a warrior. She had an owl as a pet, just like Harry Potter had an owl as a pet. And ever since the ancient Greek times, owls have been a symbol for wisdom. We need to be really wise to do a good job by children. We need to look at what the research is saying, what we know to be fact. We don't do what is just easy or cheap or what we've done for years before. We make our pedagogical decisions based on what our field is telling us is best practice. And for me, an owl represents the necessity of always going back to the research to make sure that I'm current, that I'm teaching the best and the newest information. All through the presentation today, I've given you primary sources, some sources that date back to like 1940s, but for you to be able to look and go and see the original studies that so many of us, we talk about things, but there's a root in the research where they come from. And I'm sharing that and also in the reference with you today. For the older students that I see, we have a clinic playlist that I'm constantly adding to with inspirational songs like Lean on Me and Imagine by John Lennon. So all of the teens that come, we share the playlist with them and they give me ideas of good songs to add. And it's an ongoing connection I have with children that are a little bit older. Children that are younger, we have a treasure box where there's treasures. Every time they come in, they get to pick something out of the treasure box. And I try as much as I can to have good quality things in there for them to take home with them. The goal is to make coming to see a psychologist or coming for an assessment for it to be a delightful experience. I want for children's first perception of mental health or seeking help for mental health to be one that was delightful, that was helpful, that was fun. And if I can create that first taste of seeking mental health support in that way, I believe that children who become adolescents, who become young adults, will be more likely to seek help when they need it if that first experience was a positive one. And we know the resilience literature tells us very clearly that we are resilient in a community. We're not resilient by ourselves. We're resilient in the context of the supports that we have around us. I want to now sort of switch gears and tell you about my passion in following the resilience literature. So we use the word a lot, but we sometimes don't remember where it came from. And the use of the word resilience in child development came from Dr. Emmy Werner, who finished her career at the University of California at Davis, and she passed away in 2017. In 1955, with a huge grant, she began to follow 698 children on the island of Kauai. So this is post-war, where Hawaii, of course, was very much impacted by the Second World War. This was a community that the government of the United States had identified as being an at-risk community. There were higher rates of abuse, substance use, prison. And Emmy Werner went there to study this. And she went with a specific question, and that was, what is worse? How do you rank trauma? Is it worse for a child to have a mother die or a father die? Like, how do we rank stressors and risk factors? And very soon into her research, she realized that she was asking the wrong question. What was more important to ask was, what are the protective factors? What are the things or supports in a child's life that allow them to bounce back from trauma or succeed despite having obstacles in front of them? And I'll give you a very good example. She would ask, you take two families, and both families lost a mother. Both of those families are struggling. How do you rate what trauma or what risk or what challenge was worse? What really mattered was, did one family have supports in the community, an elder sibling that could step in and provide support to the younger siblings, a church community who could provide help, like unconditionally supportive teachers and other adults in the children's lives. There were other things that made a difference, and it wasn't any longer about measuring risk. It was about understanding what protective factors matter. And I have found this work and the ongoing work to be phenomenally inspiring, especially when we're faced with so many challenges and children come with so many complex challenges. How do we begin to make a difference or to help them, right? I go to what the literature tells us. I go to resilience theory and the resilience studies to guide how I think and how I practice and how I train our team to practice. After Emmy Werner came Anne Maston, and Anne Maston is still working. She's at the University of Minnesota at a child resilience. She's created an internationally famous child resilience center at the University of Minnesota. And she's sort of taken up the gauntlet and has continued the work of Emmy Werner, and has done groundbreaking research around disaster. So like Hurricane Katrina and all sorts of other school shootings and different things. And her work is really amazing. That story to resonate so beautifully with the stories that I was collecting from practice. I had the chance to see children when they were very little, and psychoed assessments need to be redone every 3 or 4 years. And there are children who I got to see 4 or 5 times between the ages of 5 and 25. And all of that firsthand clinical experience, combined with the research that I was doing and continue to do at the University of Victoria, has led me to think about child resilience in a very particular way. And it's critical that we think about children and children's mental health. Like the vast majority of adults who are significantly impacted by mental illness, the symptoms began in their childhood. There's been an incredible increase in the amount of children presenting in hospitals and in clinics with a serious form of mental illness or developmental challenge. The suicide rate of children is increasing dramatically and is absolutely frightening with our Indigenous children on reserve and on reserve up north. We know that at least a fifth of people live with a diagnosable mental illness. So from all these different indicators, we can see that our children and our young people need help. And COVID came and made everything 10 times worse. I have been studying how COVID has affected our children and what has allowed children to be resilient despite COVID. How COVID has been very difficult is for some children, they were born, that was normal, that they don't remember a time before COVID. Other children didn't get to see anybody, like children that were single, like only children in a family, didn't get to play for a very long time with any other child. There's children whose families had significant financial challenges, children who had members of their family die or be hospitalized. So it was a critical time. And the one thing that the resilience literature says very clearly is that risk can accumulate, stress can accumulate, which means if you're starting out your day with a stressor already at play, it might not take a very big stressor on top of it to lead to a meltdown or lead to some kind of instability. It can all add up together. And so we have a community of children now that all have a COVID experience that makes it more possible for them to have a negative outcome developmentally. And so there's no better time than right now for us to be thinking about resilience and the resilience literature. Is I've created a compass, and it's a visual. It's aspects of resilience that through the course of my career, I've realized to be absolutely essential. And the way that I use the compass is like a SWOT analysis when I'm first working with a child. Children can come with so many layers of complexity, like being shuffled between parents' homes, like I could go on and on. And it can be very challenging as a clinician to know where to start. Like, what do we do, right? Where to begin? And I find that resilience theory can help me do that. And the way that resilience theory works is we're just trying to increase the odds. So it's like if you're playing poker and you want to have a good hand, that you don't know for sure that you're going to win the game, but you know having 2 aces is better than having 2 fours, okay? So continually adding protective factors to the mix makes it more likely that a child will have a good outcome. And the compass is designed to do that. There's a word in our field that we don't use a lot, but I think is important, and that's VUCA. VUCA stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we are teaching and we are parenting in a VUCA world. There's many parents that never had social media themselves that are guiding their children through how to use social media or how to defend against bullying in social media. We have parents, mothers that have never seen any form of pornography, but their 11-year-old has seen pornography. We have bots and AI taking over jobs that it's like being at the onset of Henry Ford and the first mechanical car, and we're still training students to be blacksmiths, still training them to put horseshoes on horses, even though horses are going to become redundant in 5 years at that point in our history. So we're living in this very, very VUCA world. And with so much uncertainty, we can't have like rules anymore. Like you must have your computer in the kitchen with parental controls. Like rules, black and white thinking, binary thinking isn't going to help us. We need to think about things in a way that is more sophisticated and allows us to change and alter, be nimble, to parent and teach with alacrity. That's what's needed now. And so for me, a compass was designed for me and my team to respond in a standardized, similar way that was making the best use of the resilience literature in our field. And the compass is based on systems theory and resilience theory, and also with this incredible, important idea that it's never too late, right? It's, you know, we might think that you have to see a child when they're 5 to make a difference, but you could see with Dr. Steve Mattis that he was like in his 20s and it made a difference. There's no too late. And so to be sure that we're communicating that to families and instilling hope and instilling motivation to do the right things by our children, to invest in our children. But the compass is based in systems theory. So systems theory believes that everything is in a system. So if you want to think about an ecosystem where the fish eats the poison, the bird eats the fish, the human eats the bird, right? There's these ripple effects that happen within a system. A little change at one part of the system can have a huge impact on another part of the system, okay? Classrooms are systems. The teacher, the children, the curriculum, those are all parts of the system of the classroom. And different things can happen that might seem small, but have a significant impact on that system as a whole. And why systems theory is important in considering resilience is that when a system opens, there's a chance to do something for a child that promotes resilience. Okay, so when you think about adult psychology, okay, an adult goes to university, they get trained, they get their job, they could be in that same job for 20 years. That system isn't opening. People get kind of stuck into a rut, and it's difficult to make change. Children, because of their developmental pathway, are changing all the time. Every new year is an opening of the system. Every new grade is an opening of the system. Having an assessment done is an opening of a system. Seeing a counselor is an opening of a system. And when these systems open, it gives the competent and important adults in that child's life the chance to do something, add a protective factor that will have a ripple effect for that child and the family. And it fits so beautifully with resilience theory. So again, as I mentioned, resilience as an idea came from Emmy Werner. In 1955, she decided to do a longitudinal study, 698 children. She studied them for 40 years. It was one of the best designed prospective studies that we have ever had. And she was able to identify some of the first known primary protective factors. And we've heard of them. So she found that the children in Kauai who had at least one supportive adult figure in their life, other than a parent, so a teacher, a coach, mentor, made a significant difference for children. The children in the family that were older did better than the children, on average, did better than the children who were younger. And the idea here is that they had more responsibility, they had more agency, they had self-efficacy. Okay. She found that families that had a cultural connection, so whether that be church or a Polynesian cultural connection, did better than the children that didn't. Children who had positive temperaments and who were not irritable and sad and upset all the time did better than the children who didn't have positive temperaments. So she has gone on and on and on and helped us to understand what the most important things to consider were. And then Anne Maston, she did something that was really interesting, is that she proved that resilience is not a trait. So it's not like you're born with blue eyes or brown eyes. Like the color of your eyes is a trait. You're born with it or not. Resilience is not a trait. You're not born with it or not. Every single human being has the capacity to foster resilience. And it's something that we can do no matter when we encounter the child, whether it's early in their development or later in their development. As important adults in that child's life, we can systematically do things that give that child a better hand, a better poker hand. We don't know for sure that that is going to lead to a positive outcome, but we know that it's going to increase the probability and significantly increase the probability of a positive outcome. And so that's really where the compass that I'm about to share with you, where that comes from, and why it's so important, and why your job and your ability to impact change in a child's life is so critically important developmentally. So, what's new? Everything. Okay. In children's lives, there's something new all the time. It's like they're on a perpetual learning curve. Something is changing in their life all the time. And with every change, there's an opportunity to promote resilience. And it's never too late. There's always hope. If there's one gift you can give a family, that is hope. So it's so easy to lose hope, to feel like the system doesn't work, that the children are so far behind the curriculum goals, that a child's been to 7 different foster homes. Like, it's so easy to lose hope. But it is incredibly important that we help children and families and colleagues develop hope. So the first part is start early. Think about intervention as early as possible. Start addressing things as early as possible. One of the things that Anne Maston's work taught us was small things done every day had a big impact on the system. So reading to a child for 20 minutes every day over the course of 2, 3, 4 years has a compounded interest impact. Okay. She called the habits that we establish every day, she described it as ordinary magic. So the idea there is starting early with something that becomes a habit. It's like something that maybe might feel very ordinary, but over time, it has a big impact on development. The second is unconditional love or acceptance. And so unconditional love or acceptance is that grace of giving a child space to make a mistake, to show up differently, to be forgiven, to be able to outgrow a reputation. A parent who's in tears. Okay, so unconditional love or acceptance is that grace, that space that allows us to develop a growth mindset. Staying current, okay, the staying current is about who's influencing our children, okay? What are our children watching? What are they reading? What are they listening to? What games are they playing? Who is influencing them? Are we connected and engaged and turned on to all of that? Are we taking the time to talk with children and understand what is going on in their life? Are we staying abreast of the changes in our field, the new curriculums, the new pedagogies? Okay, staying current. Setting smart boundaries is incredibly important. And boundaries, we talk a lot with our kids about like a physical bubble. But smart boundaries is also things like keeping your promise, not passing on. So, and on the internet, there's some guidelines for how to be a good digital citizen. So when I was growing up, I was told you never pass along an insult. You only pass along a compliment. So if a classmate says that they don't like their friend's haircut, you wouldn't repeat that. You might hear it, but you don't repeat it. If you see something that is embarrassing or shared without permission or something like that online, you don't like it and you don't share it. It stops with you. Okay, that's a kind of boundary. And so to make sure that we are talking about not just physical boundaries, but emotional boundaries is important. So this is actually a typo that should say nurture relationship. Sorry that I missed that, but nurturing relationships. It's that community, that togetherness, that connection, that understanding that we can't be resilient in isolation. And there's so many layers to nurturing relationships, whether it's between children, between parent and teacher, between colleagues. But nurturing relationships is certainly, if not the most, one of the most important aspects of resilience. Losing stigma and prejudice. Okay, so we know that our children who identify with the LGBTQ community, if they are not supported by their parents, their risk of suicide is incredibly higher. Okay, we know that racism against our Indigenous, like systemic racism against our Indigenous children is incredibly harmful. And there's systemic racism in our medical system. And Truth and Reconciliation is asking us to fight back against that. Rosalia Bella is one of the Supreme Court Justices of Canada. And I've actually been interested in her and have followed her since I read a royal commission that she wrote in 1985. And she coined a phrase called enabling perceptions. Okay, so there's like this idea that, and any of you who are had children in strollers, you will see that there's lots and lots of buildings, sidewalks that are completely inaccessible. where there's no way a wheelchair could go down it or up it. And when you have a child in a stroller, you get to experience that. Rosalia Bella said that when there were children with challenges segregated, sent off to schools, separate schools, the typical child did not develop enabling perceptions. So when that typical child became an architect or became whatever professional, it didn't occur to them to create an accessible building because they never saw the need for that. So enabling perceptions is this idea that we can create a different zeitgeist. We can create a different kind of community kindness and exception and inclusivity when we teach it in a forthright way to our children. And there's 2 of my books, On the Playground and What Makes Us Unique, that were inspired by Rosalia Bella's work. Now, building resilience is what this is all about. All of these points are designed to build resilience. They all work together. And thinking about the tenets of resilience theory, what the research is telling us is incredibly important, and it's going to change what we know and what children need. Were certainly changed because of COVID, right? There's going to be other changes, and it's important that we're nimble and we can change along with the changing needs of our children. So every clinician in MindKey is trained to think about case formulation with this compass. And I think this compass can be applied in lots of very helpful ways to ensure that we're doing the best things that we can by children. So those are the 7 points of the compass, which I've designed to help sort of situate the thinking in a way that is most likely going to result in a positive outcome. And my little book, My Promise, this was my last book, my most recent book, that was published, beautifully illustrated by Slavka, who's a Czechoslovakian artist, just beautiful, beautiful illustrations. What I've tried to do in My Promise is distill the 7 points of the compass into the most simple takeaways for a parent and a child. And what I'm going to end with, this. This is My Promise, read by a child. It's a board book. It's not very long, but this is meant to sort of encapsulate all of the different concepts that we were thinking about today and communicating them in the most simple way possible.
Hi, friends. Let's read My Promise. So let's start. My promise. When you were born, I promised to take care of you. If you wander too far away, I will come find you. When you feel small, I will teach you to be strong. If you feel alone, I will gather others around you. If you want to change, I will understand. I will help you. When you need help, I will guide you. When mistakes are made, I will forgive you. Because when you are born, I promise to take care of you.
So all today, I've been trying to connect the information with the primary sources to underscore the importance of evidence-based practice. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote this quote. I share this quote with people that have undergone tremendous trauma, and they're in a place of trauma recovery. And I'll read it to finish off our time today. The most beautiful people we have known are those who have known defeat, known suffering, known struggle, known loss, and have found their way out of the depths. These persons have an appreciation, a sensitivity, and an understanding of life that fills them with compassion, gentleness, and a deep, loving concern. Beautiful people do not just happen.